So welcome everyone. My name is Mark Slavkin. I serve as Director of Education at the Wallace Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts in Beverly Hills, California. And we're excited to share a bit of a preview of an exciting project coming up at the Wallace, March 3rd through 6th, that is called Reckoning, a Short Plays Festival. And the purpose of our conversation today is to provide an opportunity for you to meet the writers as well as the director and myself, and actually a chance for us to connect to different parts of the world where people are located right now. But the magic of Zoom is bringing us together. So we hope you enjoy the conversation. We hope it inspires you to come join us in person March 3rd through 6th at the Wallace. It is a heartening time after a difficult pandemic, and I should say knock on wood, but the return of live theater is so meaningful for all of us, for the actors in the show, and for everyone at the Wallace. We're in the business of bringing people together to experience art on our stages, and it's been hard to be out of the building and isolated. So really looking forward to next week and glad we can share today. I would just add the Wallace presents and produces work in theater and dance and music and film in pretty eclectic and interesting ways. And we also have a robust commitment to engage people of all ages and all abilities in the arts that we call Grow at the Wallace. So one of the many programs Grow is proud to offer is the Wallace Studio Ensemble, which is really a unique opportunity for early career actors as they transition from college or training and they enter the world of professional theater in LA, to have an artistic home, a source of community, a place to grow and share with other artists and their peers, and to meet and hopefully learn from other folks at the Wallace that we're bringing to our stages. So really proud to do the program and excited that this program, which too has been on Zoom, is back in person with tremendous actors that we're really proud to present. So with that, I want to introduce the director of the studio ensemble, who has done a masterful job creating this program over several years and weathering the pandemic, but also weaving together this project, which is not easy or simple. Many different writers, many different pieces, limited time as always, but making something very special. So let me ask Madeleine to share a little bit more about the studio ensemble, but then sort of the inspiration for this idea of a short play festival, how that kind of has come together. So Madeleine, turn it to you.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, as Mark said, the Studio Ensemble is a company for early career actors, supporting them as they build a professional portfolio in Los Angeles. We have 8 current company members, and we audition each year to bring new company members into the company. And this sort of really came about because in my country of birth, England, there's a strong support of programs and artistic opportunities for emerging actors. And when I came to the United States, I didn't feel that there was as much. I thought that there were many youth programs, but that time after you've done training and that time after you've left college and you've maybe been in the professional world 1-2 years, there wasn't really anything to support that kind of journey into that world. And there were several programs that I benefited from as a young artist in the United Kingdom. And so I approached Mark, my goodness, was it 5 years ago, 6 years ago? I can't remember now, about the idea of creating this company. And I think, and Joe Rodriguez, who is one of the writers in this play festival, was one of the founding actors of that company. And so it's really wonderful to have Joe come back and join us as a writer. And I think at that time, we didn't quite know what the company was going to be or become. So we had 9 actors in that first year. And I think we had intended, well, you know, let's just sort of see what happens. And I think I had grown up in a tradition of very collaborative based work, devised work coming from a world of dance theatre. And so the natural way of us to work was very collaborative. And as part of those early conversations with the actors and particularly what was happening politically in the world at that time. It was right before a particular election, shall I say, and we kind of felt that we had to stop and address what was going on around us, and that working on a traditional play just didn't seem like it was going to be a great option for us. And so really that began our journey into focusing on devised work, and really creating work that spoke to issues that were important to the actors in the company, and creating original narratives. And then in addition to that, we have found existing plays that we've also worked and performed with at the Wallace. And as we went through the pandemic, we were expecting to be doing a production at the Wallace in June, and of course that didn't happen. And so we began to find ways that we could stay creative and connected online. And so two of our company members, Tiana Randall-Quant and Alex Sheldon, wrote an original radio soap opera play that was 8 episodes long, and we essentially filmed that over the summer. It was received thousands of hits on social media, and it kept us connected over an 8-week period. And at the end of that, we were all like, well, now what next? And so we really began to realize that a lot of writers were also feeling very isolated and disconnected from their communities. And so we decided that we would reach out and try to connect with local writers that were short storytellers, that were playwrights. And that's how we came to meet Alex Kingsley and Starina Johnson back in the summer. And we actually produced a short story podcast series, and that Alex Kingsley had a story that was part of that, and Starina had a play that we were kind of looking at sort of producing. And then coming out of that summer and coming back into the Wallace, that idea of connecting with all of these wonderful writers kind of stayed with us. And I think this desire to celebrate writers and the incredible work that you often do in isolation, working away in your own spaces, and to really celebrate that and to bring together unique voices for an evening of work really was something that was a driving force as we kind of came out of this pandemic and wanted to really find this way to talk about issues in clever, interesting, and innovative ways. And so so it really was a journey to coming to this play festival. And I think it's been an extraordinary journey for us to work on each of the plays. There's something quite extraordinarily unique about telling a story in an average of 12 minutes. And I know we do have a couple of plays that are longer than that, but the majority of plays are around 10 to 12 minutes. And the poems are around 10 minutes as well. And we have a short story that's around 5 minutes. And so I think one of the things that I've been so excited by is how you have been able to tell incredibly complex narratives and stories within an incredibly short time frame. And I don't think anybody at the end of each of these poems, short stories, or plays would feel that they have been cheated out of something because it's only been 10 minutes. And I think your ability to move us, make us think, and make us laugh within that time frame is just a testament to what extraordinary writers you are.
Well, thank you. Well, let's get started, hear from the writers who are able to join. Not everyone is able to be with us right now, which I'm pleased we have as many as we do. Scheduling is always a challenge. So thank you for joining us. Maybe, Alex, are you ready to just start off and share a little bit about your piece?
Yeah, of course. My piece in the Short Play Festival is called The Bearer of Bad News. It is a speculative dark comedy about a near future where most species of animal have gone extinct, and in order to continue the species, humans need to carry the fetuses of animals. And it's about a woman going through this process and how it affects her relationships, how it affects her life, how it affects her relationships with the other people who are going through the same process, and ultimately is about her understanding of her agency and bodily autonomy.
And I guess the issues are so real and so present right now. What drew you to do it in a very funny way, which is not obvious given the issue, to do it that way?
Yeah, describing it out loud, I'm like, this really doesn't sound like a comedy, does it? And in many ways, it's not. I come from a comedy background. I write a lot of comedy. I do stand-up. I started in sketch. So comedy is something that comes very naturally to me. And when I say it comes naturally to me, I don't mean to say like, oh, I'm just naturally funny. I more mean whenever I am writing, there is always an impulse to be like, where's the joke? Where's the humor in the situation? And I also just think that's a very human thing. I think we all do that to some degree. And I often find that plays that are just hitting you really hard with the tragedy, anything that's hitting you really hard with tragedy, sometimes comes off as disingenuous or as difficult to relate to because there isn't that impulse of people going, where's the joke? Where's the light? Where's the humor? And I find that things that are really emotive and effective for me are the things that manage to temper the dark with the light. So it wasn't an intentional choice of like, well, this is too dark, I got to add some jokes. It was more of that was how it flowed naturally, and that's how it felt right to me.
Very well said. And a reminder that sometimes people listen better to humor, in a sense, that it gets through to them in a different way. Krysta, can you share a bit about your piece, Infinite?
Yeah, sure thing. Hi, y'all. I'm Krysta. I wrote the piece Infinite in collaboration with the actors, which was a really special experience because device theater is a large part of my background. So when we began the process, I asked the actors, what do you want to feel when you walk off stage? I've been thinking about the heavy container we've been existing in and wanted to contribute to fortifying my fellow artists. And the 4 Black actors wanted to kind of ground in Black joy. And also, to Alex's point, temper with the very real difficulties that inform the Black experience without grounding in that as much. And they also wanted to step away from using theater to educate in this circumstance. So I asked them to share a little bit about themselves and ended up creating a dance theater piece that explores the endurance of Black joy through all kinds of interruptions.
And what inspired the title?
So I think the well that we must draw from in order to overcome and prevail and persevere must be infinite. It must be an infinite well of hope and looking towards the future and dreamscaping. So hence Infinite.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Starina, can you share about your pieces?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, so my pieces are Daniel the Brave and Guiding Light. Actually, both of these started off as prompts from Playground LA, which is a group that I'm a part of. So it's kind of funny that they both, I feel like have a lot of similarities with each other in terms of kind of over, themes. Like I just realized that both of them are kind of female takes on typically male told stories. Sorry. I'm not sure what else to say without giving stuff away, I guess. So I'm trying to like walk that line right now.
Yeah, maybe say a little bit more though about the idea of empowerment.
I'm being too quiet with it. Okay.
Agency, empowerment.
Yes. So. Yeah. Keep in mind, I'm also very jet lagged, so I'm trying to put words together in my brain right now. So, but yeah, so basically, one of the prompts, and I apologize, I can't think of what the prompt was, but when I was young, I used to really love Greek mythology, but one of the stories that I never could get over because I couldn't figure out, it didn't make sense to me, which is the story of Medusa. And so because of the prompt, I kind of sat with it and I was like, okay, why isn't this story, why doesn't it feel right to me? And I realized that, the story didn't feel right to me because it was told from a man was telling the story. A man was telling the story, and it's a very female story. And so I started thinking of what exactly what the female version would look like, kind of a he said, she said, what would be her version of what happened to her. So that's kind of where the idea for Daniel the Brave came from. And Guiding Light was a little bit kind of like that as well. I actually realized it during rehearsal the other day. One of the actors had mentioned, she was like, Mary's usually portrayed as like, kind of a, so passive. And I was like, well, yeah, because a guy's telling her story. I don't know too many passive women when it comes to pregnancy. So yeah, so that's kind of where the ideas kind of came from, I guess you could say. So.
Great, thank you. Phillip, welcome. We're delighted it worked out for you to be with us. Can you share a little bit about the poems that you shared for this festival, and maybe of the other work you've done, what drew you to these particular pieces right now to work with us?
So Epistolamium, both pieces, He Loved Him Madly and the Epistolamium, are part of my debut collection, Thief in the Interior. And Epistolamium is toward the end of the book, where I was considering, at that time, there was a huge celebration for gay marriage, but it oftentimes came in condescension to some of the issues that were still plaguing the LGBT community, particularly around those who did not have access to even being married, regardless of if they had the desire or not. Thinking of homelessness, trans rights, things like that. And I wanted to write a poem that had the essence of recognition that this is really important for those who want to do it, while still there are other issues and concerns that could make it such that, to be married could even be more dangerous depending on who you are and where you are. But at the end of the poem, what does exist in all of the, because it's a short poem, it's a sonnet, and all of the aftermath of other people's hatred is love. Love is what is considerably the, what I consider to be the resolution of that poem. And with He Loved Him Madly, that's a longer poem that is in the form of a pechakucha, and that's a Japanese business form where you have 20 slides that show images or briefly go over some of the topics that'll be presented for whatever the themes are. But Terrence Hayes took it from the business meeting application and made it into a poetic form that are pretty much these flash shots of a scene of some kind of internal emotional investigation. They can be loosely narrative, but mostly they what connects them is just the chain of their thematic concerns. And so mine is called He Loved Him Madly, based off of a Miles Davis track composition called He Loved Him Madly. And it explores two things at once: the aftermath of the crack epidemic, the war on drugs, and also my relationship with my father, who battled with drug addiction. And then the poems that deal with the war on drugs, they take their slide titles from hip hop songs that are about either the creation of drugs, selling drugs, the infiltration of drugs into Black communities. And then the Miles Davis tracks label the sections of the poems that are about my relationship with my father, his experiences growing up. They're more personal as opposed to societal. And I was honored to be asked about those two parts. I didn't choose them. I would have probably chosen two other ones, but these are actually pretty cool ideas. No one ever pays attention to He Loves Him Madly, and it's one of my favorite poems in the book. And I think it's the length, and also it's not the easiest poem to deal with. The topics are heavy, even though even in that poem, there are essences and sparks of love and admiration and appreciation.
Great. Well, thank you. We're delighted that we can share them and bring a new audience to hear it.
Absolutely.
Here's a spoken word, right, version of it. So Joe, do you want to share about your piece, Why We're Here? Which is actually a question about this call, but also the title of your piece, Why We're Here.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. So, why we're here was it's been like a process in the making. This is probably, I consider like it's like third evolution. But in regards to what it's about, it was also like how Wallace's studio ensemble's inception. It was also inspired by a particular election and a particular person. And it was really two different things, that being one of them. And in that, it was a healing fantasy. And it was like this wish that it was a healing fantasy. And what that is it's a wish that a person that cyclically hurts you, that eventually there will be a day where they realize their wrongdoing and decide that they are going to change. And I really just like, I wanted to imagine that these people in power that do bad things and could redirect all that energy that they have towards destruction towards something good. And it was that combined with something somewhat completely different, which was the feeling of despair and the thought that you are not enough. And I think enough is a key word because that means so many different things in the play. I feel like it's very much like a half full, half empty kind of thing, depending on what you're talking about. And I hope that when people leave this play, they ask themselves, are you enough? What makes you enough? And why are you here?
Sort of like the meaning of life in a lot of ways, but boiled down to a short piece.
It's in the name.
Thank you, Joe. And Eric, do you want to share about A Bowl of Soup?
Sure, I'd love to. My play is called A Bowl of Soup. It comes out of my own experience. I had lost a partner to AIDS. This was at the height of the epidemic, another pandemic, obviously. And, it was a time where there was no such thing as marriage equality. So somebody could, be another person's partner for 20 years and you had no legal rights. Somebody who was a distant cousin had more legal rights than you did. So that's just sort of the framework behind it. But the piece is really about two brothers. The first character being Rob, who has lost his partner and is at a point where he can barely speak. And he's visited by his brother Eddie, who is more working class in the tile business, talks a lot, and uses language to try and bring Rob back, to get him to find his voice again. And the piece, it's real. I think what it's really about is finding that connection in the midst of sadness and grief and everything that was going on, to still find a sense of compassion and a sense of love and a sense of joy in each other. And that's how I would describe it.
Great. Well, thank you.
Sure.
So Madeleine, I'm just curious if you want to share, like, how did we arrive at these pieces? Was there a pre-existing theme that everything had to fit into, or was it more selecting pieces because you and the actors really liked the pieces and then reflecting on what through lines might exist or what themes? Does that make sense, to sort of chicken and egg a little bit?
I mean, yeah, obviously, because we're a company that, our sort of mission statement is to use theatre or explore theatre that's a galvanizing force for social change, that we are interested in exploring issues that are contemporary issues that speak to and support different narratives and different viewpoints. And so I think we've always been drawn to complex issues as a company. And I think so for us, in terms of bringing in different poems, short stories, and short plays, it was really looking for writers that had really specific viewpoints and radical viewpoints. And I think each of these plays, whether they were a comedy or a drama or a dramedy or a tragedy or a combination of all of those, the voice of the writer really clearly was established. It was really present, and the viewpoint of the writer and what they really wanted to explore was really kind of evident. And each of the writers were exploring them in incredibly innovative and unique ways, whether that was the environment in which the play took place, the way they worked with the characters, just the relationship between people in the plays. So I think each of the writers we have in the festival all have very unique, innovative voices, and I think are working in ways that are very original. So I think, and that's not to say that other writers that submitted work didn't have those elements in their work, but I think there was something about each of these plays, and obviously the writers that are not with us here today, that we really connected with as a company. And then also because we are a young company, the average age of the actors in our company is 23 to 29. And so again, we had to make sure we had plays that we could explore as that particular age demographic. So we had some wonderful plays that came in, but they were meant for characters that were much older. And sometimes you can change the age of a character. So for example, in Joe's play, one of the main characters, Joe, when Joe talked about being on draft 3, Joe did a lot of adjustments for the play because it was written for a much older person. And so Joe did some kind of real shifts in terms of making it work for a younger person to play one of the roles. And so so that was something that also was part of the process that we were sort of looking for. And we really wanted to reach out and support writers from very diverse backgrounds, writers from the LGBTQ community, Black writers, women writers. And so that was something that also we really wanted, because that is who we are as a company. And that was something that was important to us to also be really conscious in terms of choosing pieces and reaching out to writers.
Great. And the other challenge, which we don't have to get into all the detail, but weaving these together brings up questions like sequence and what goes before what, and how does it work to go from that piece to that piece. And then adding in, well, is there a costume change in between? And is there enough time for the particular actor to reemerge in a new costume? So that's been a fun part of the process, because it is not, I mean, Madeleine can correct me, but we're not doing piece A, lights up, lights down, shift, now piece B in a very kind of chopped way, that we're trying to weave them together in a way.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Mark, because that is a challenge, because we want to maintain the integrity of each piece and that each writer feels that their piece there's no confusion at the end or beginning of their piece in terms of, that is their piece. But again, this idea that it's not, these pieces are kind of telling a broader story. And so in terms of the sort of curating the pieces and the sort of dramaturge of the whole festival, where a play happens and how it kind of continues a theme that might have been explored in a previous play or takes us in a different direction, that's definitely been part of the process of how we kind of create this evening. And I hope that if people come to the festival, that they feel like it's an evening of work as opposed to an evening of multiple different individual pieces. It's a kind of collection of all of these incredible pieces by these really wonderful, innovative writers.
Yes, so that's one of many reasons I'm excited about it. So let me ask for any of the writers, is writing for theater been a significant or main focus of your work, or other forms? And in either case, what drew you to this festival and to sharing your work with us? Anyone want to share that?
Definitely my primary focus has been theater. I really have barely had like any interest in writing for screen, just because I just love, like, it feels so, I guess, more like hands-on. Like, it just feels, I don't know, it feels like clay in a sense. And maybe like this is so literal, but like, you know, like writing for film feels like photography. It just feels like snapshots, but a play, I don't know. It is, there's a lot to it. And I guess because like my work tends to be kind of very nonlinear and does kind of, you know, sometimes resemble the work that we have done at the Wallace, because it's, you know, influenced me so much. You know, I want things where it's kind of this like performance, dance, like movement base, which is seen in film, but not as much. And so the reason why I have always wanted the studio ensemble to do a piece of mine, it has been on my bucket list, is just because, you know, it's really hard to find creators that not only respect your work, you know, and you as an artist, but also can like match your style and values. And so that was just like very wonderful to have. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Any other take on that? The appeal of writing for stage, or the downside, if there's one.
See, I was going to say, I actually normally I start off writing for like plays, but a lot of times they'll actually end up getting made into like short form content, like either, you know, something somebody will put up on YouTube, or even like short films, things like that. But I was so excited for these two plays that got picked was because these are my kind of more less like filmable plays, you know, like they're more kind of not abstract, but they're more theatrical. So I've been super excited to actually see these be performed, you know, like live. I'm super excited about that. So, but for me, I actually really enjoy writing short form content. Like I know a lot of people are like, oh, is it hard to make short form content? And for me, it's not. Actually, for me, it's almost impossible to get me to write something longer than 30 minutes. Like I just start editing myself. I mean, like, I'm like, no, we don't need that. We don't need that. We don't need any of this to tell this story, you know? So for me, short form content is kind of it's where I live. I love it. I love to be able to tell a story quickly, and I love to do it quickly and it be impactful, because I feel like if you get it in and out fast, it makes people like think a little more. Like it makes them think, oh, I wonder what those characters are doing now. Like they don't know the whole story. They just know this tiny sliver of life in these characters. And I feel like it makes them use their imagination more. And I love when people leave a play and they're like, I wonder what those characters are doing now. You know, and they start thinking in their own adventures that these characters could be having, you know. So that's my love for the short form content stuff. So.
Got it. But in the theater world, is it harder to get a piece produced that is shorter in that way? You know, that a theater might go, how does this fit? Unless it's a project like this that we're calling a festival that weaves together many pieces. Has that been an issue?
I think it depends on because you know, different companies do different things. So if somebody, like, let's say, like does a prompt kind of a thing, then they pick the best of the plays from that prompt. Or if they have like a theme, like I was with a theater company who did airport themes. So all the stories had to take place in an airport, and they would weave together all of these different short plays in an airport theme. And, you know, that's where the setting was. but then, you know, you also have like the companies that are just looking for anything. It's just a mixed bag. You know, you can submit any of your plays. And I think for those, I do a lot of reading for those kind of theater plays. So it's always interesting to see what people submit. And especially if it's a writer that you've read, like for, you know, a different theater company, and you're like, oh, I read their work, and it's seeing what they've picked for each of the different theater companies per what the requirements were that they posted, you know what I mean? So that's always kind of super interesting, kind of a behind the scenes of seeing what people submit for topics versus you know, what gets accepted for topics, you know. But for me, I feel like I kind of gravitate more towards ones that either have a theme or have some kind of a prompt, because I find those very inspiring. It's just, I find it challenging, you know. Sometimes you're like, okay, slow down with the prompts. I don't need 20 things, like maybe 5. Can we do 5? But, you know.
Got you. I'm curious how any of you have changed as writers during the pandemic. Are you in a different way of thinking about your work now than you were 2 years ago, let's say?
I'm more willing to not write. Oh, would you like to go?
No, you go ahead, please.
Okay, yeah, I'm more willing to not write. Just like if it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. Particularly because the commodification of it, depending on what genre it is, but I imagine that all genres have a certain demand and certain things that are guidelines in order for it to reach an audience. That can just be exhausting. And I was slowly already in the process of no longer feeling as though, you know, I could write in order to get something published to reach someone for a larger project along the lines to get the attention that I would like for it to have. With COVID, everything about my life had to slow down. And so my imagination was part of that slowing down. And it was very refreshing to do that. And there was no internal demand for me to get something published, for me to, you know, share that, oh, something is on its way. And though I interestingly enough, published a book of poetry doing COVID, but I felt no pressure in writing it and finishing it. I did it because I wanted to do it, not because I felt like I needed to do it. There was no lack of capaciousness in my mind, as though, you know, the scarcity model, if I don't do it, someone else will. And I'm hoping that for a lot of folks, COVID allowed for us to slow down, even though I know the devastation that it's caused. It's not always a helpful feeling to have been slowed down, if that makes sense. But returning to the personal, it's been eye-opening as to just how dangerous things were when it came to capitalism affecting the work and modifying the way that I could have been producing, meaning that I could have in the past not only taken more time, I'm a slow writer anyway, but also waited between, you know, releasings of poems. I'm predominantly a poet, to just let myself evolve as a person so that what I think about the world and how I see the world could then also be present in the poems. You know, there's a way that just keep publishing without evolving as a person, you end up writing the same poem over and over again. And so, yeah, I learned to be more patient with myself and to really embrace the fact that I do not have to write in this moment if I don't want to. It's the time to observe, and also the time to build a kind of spirituality, to be grounded in, you know, what I believe and why I believe what I believe.
Thank you. Alex, did you want to share on that?
Yeah, I actually, if this is okay, I have an answer that kind of fuses both questions. Is that acceptable? Okay. So I kind of, unlike Joe, have always kind of enjoyed writing everything, not just focusing on live theater, but doing like a variety, doing film, writing prose, all these things. But I really had a focus on live theater for 2 reasons. One was, I think, and I'm sure everyone here will agree, because we're all involved in live theater in some way, there's a kind of aura that's present in live theater that you just don't get in other forms of media and storytelling. Like, I think every form of storytelling has its own magic to it, but there's something very specific about being present in the same space with other people while a story is unfolding. And I think the other thing that drew me to live theater is the accessibility of it. And when I say accessibility, I mean, if you write a feature-length screenplay, you need so many resources in order to produce that at a professional level. But theater can be anything. It is so broad that you don't need the same kinds of support in order to just put on a piece of theater. So the fact that it can be so universal and can be for everyone is really special. So that being said, the pandemic happened, and then this thing that I had been building my whole life around, live theater, and again, I'm sure everyone here can relate to this, was suddenly no longer a thing that was possible. And I had this huge existential crisis because I was like, this is the thing that I've built my identity around. What am I going to do when I can no longer do the things that I love? Because it's not only writing for live theater, but also, doing stand-up comedy, doing sketch, all of these things that involved this live performance aspect. And I tell this story all the time, even though I'm sure the person involved has no memory of this. I had a call with my former playwriting professor, and I was telling him that I was thinking about getting involved in audio drama because that was it was an accessible way for me to produce writing, to still work with my collaborators, to still work with actors, work with friends, and build something together, but it wasn't live theater. And I asked him, is this okay? Like, I was asking for permission, and I said, I feel like I'm betraying theater by doing this. And he said, I hope I'm betraying theater every day. Like, is that not the point of theater, is to keep betraying it, to find, isn't that how we find new things? Isn't that how we innovate? And again, I'm sure he has no memory of saying this. That was the most mind-blowing thing to me. So I got together with my friends and I was like, guys, we're going to betray theater. We're going to form a production company and it's just going to produce stuff. So, now we do audio drama and games and all sorts of alternative methods of telling stories. So if anything, what the pandemic did, to bring it around to the actual question, for me, how the pandemic influenced my writing is really kind of cracking open my notion of how we tell stories and participate in telling stories with each other, and what is theater and how do we define it, and how can it intermix with different kinds of media, specifically games and audio storytelling are kind of the new niche that I have found. And I don't think I would have ended up there if it weren't for being stuck inside for months.
That's a great story. Thank you, Alex. It's something that those of us who work in buildings designed to have people in the room in a theater have really struggled with during the pandemic is, well, film, it's not the same, or YouTube is not the same, or audio not the same. And I think to your point, well, yeah, it's not all the same, but there's a place for all of it. And let go a little bit of this precious attitude that it only can be in a certain format or it's less than, because I think going forward, the world's going to need all of it, right, to share stories in a variety of formats. But thank you.
Well, that was part of why I personally, I loved Zoom so much, is because people, to see where Zoom started off when people were trying to be creative on Zoom to where it's been getting to, it has advanced so much. And I just find that super inspiring, honestly, to see people being like, we want to be creative. How can we be creative? And it's, it's kind of to me, the difference between a proscenium stage and a black box theater, you know what I mean? You have a film, sure, but Zoom is this weird, especially if you're not doing the as live Zooms, if you're actually doing a live Zoom, it's this weird hybrid baby of theater and film. And then, just to see the technology that has advanced from being forced to do this, creative people, we want something done. We will figure out a way to make it happen. If we have to, figure out the codes or do whatever, or make an entire new platform, we will, and like to me, I think the pandemic in terms of artistic expression has been very inspiring to see what people are coming up with and how inventive they can be. So
Thank you. Yeah, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was going to, in answering your question, I actually found the pandemic a very productive time for me to write. And I think it was because, so the pandemic really kind of hit in March of 2020. And by the time the summer came, I just felt like I needed to write, and was able to write a play set in another time period with other characters and to sort of immerse myself in that world, so that when I woke up at 3 a.m, instead of going in a spin cycle about COVID, I would start to think, well, I wonder what happens in that next scene, or what happens with this character. And I felt like it was a real gift to be able to enter another world that in some ways related to what we were going through at the time, but it just kind of, it allowed me to find some solace, to connect with other characters, to connect with another time and another world. And it was an extremely creative time. And what I also found was that the characters just kept talking. Usually I write a play and it's about 80 to 90 pages. This play wound up being 160 pages long. They just kept going, and they just had a lot to say. And I felt like if I could just follow that, that would be terrific. And my background is primarily focused in theater. I've also written a bit for television. I've written for film as well. But there's something about theater and about that immediacy, about being in a room with other people and the energy and the connection between the actors and the audience, that is magical to me and always has been. There's a level that I feel I experience as an audience member and that I, as a playwright, try to connect with as well. So it's really where I feel like I'll continue to do other forms, but theater feels like a home that I always come back to.
Great. Well, I want to wrap us up, but Krysta, before we go, just give you a chance if you wanted to speak to how has the pandemic maybe changed or not changed you, or what draws you to work in the theater setting?
Well, I've been in theater for a very long time, so it is very much my home, my center, my North Star. I came to the theater originally as an actor, but I found myself really being summoned as a writer during the pandemic, and people were looking for shorter form because we were figuring out how to be three-dimensional beings in a two-dimensional space. In a live two-dimensional space. So yeah, I echo everyone's experience of, yeah, we're creative, we're gonna figure it out, we're gonna make stuff or take a break when we need to be only humans and not artists as well. And yeah, I think the pandemic gave me that full breath, and I had the opportunity to write a lot more in that time period than before, even recently.
Well, good. That's a hopeful place to end. There's so much despair in the pandemic, but the idea that it could be an artistic catalyst to move us forward, us meaning the world, not just us on the call, gives me some hope. So thank you for making time for this conversation. Thank you for all the work you do and for trusting us to share your work with an audience March 3rd through 6th at the Wallace Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts in Beverly Hills. We hope those of you who are able to come will come and experience the work of these wonderful writers in person. So yeah, Madeleine, maybe just ask if you have a final word and we'll sign off.
Yes, just again, just thank you to all of the writers that are here and who are not able to join us today. It's just been an honor and a privilege to to work with what you have written. And it's always a delicate dance when you take something that somebody has written and put themselves into, and then they hand it over to you as a company, as actors and as a director. And it's that dance between honoring their original vision, but also bringing ideas that actors have to that, your own vision as a director. And so I hope that we have done you proud and that we have brought your pieces to life in ways that honor you and that will provide a respite for the audience. And so we are hoping to make you think, to make you laugh, and to bring you together as a community to enjoy live theatre in a week's time. So, but thank you all very much for your wonderful work.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we'll sign off for now.